At Christmas, my sister told me, "Don't bring your family, they're too low class for my circle." I brought them anyway. And when she started mocking them, I raised my glass and said, "A toast to my spoiled sister who thinks she's rich, by the way. I'm done paying for your lifestyle." Cut off. Completely. My blood ran cold when my sister, Heather, uttered those words, "Don't bring your family. They're low class and not on my level. Just you." Can you believe it? 15 years I'd spent supporting her lavish lifestyle, struggling to raise my kids on a nurse's salary, and this was my thanks. That Christmas was about to change everything between us, and I had a decision to make. I've always been the responsible one. While my younger sister, Heather, chased dreams of luxury, I built a life centered on what truly matters. My children, Emma and Tyler, 10 and 8. Our modest 3-bedroom rental might not be in magazines, but it's filled with laughter and love. As a pediatric nurse, I often pull double shifts to provide for us, but seeing my kids thrive makes every exhausting hour worthwhile. Heather and I took different paths from the beginning. Growing up in suburban Michigan, we shared a bedroom, but we might as well have been from different planets. While I saved my allowance for books and later college, Heather spent every penny on fashion magazines and makeup. I still remember her 16-year-old declaration, "I'm going to marry rich and never worry about money again." Our parents, hardworking teachers, would exchange worried glances when Heather made such pronouncements. Dad would gently remind us that character outlasts possessions, while Mom emphasized that true success comes from contribution, not acquisition. These lessons shaped me, but seemed to bounce off Heather entirely. After college, where I studied nursing on scholarships and worked part-time, I started my career and met Jack, my children's father. Our relationship didn't last. He wasn't ready for family responsibilities, but he gave me Emma and Tyler. He sends occasional child support checks when he remembers, but we manage without counting on them. Meanwhile, Heather dropped out of community college after meeting Richard, the son of a successful real estate developer. Their whirlwind romance led to a lavish wedding. I remember emptying my modest savings to help them pay for the flowers Heather insisted she needed. She promised to pay me back someday, but that day never came. Instead, a pattern emerged. Heather would call in tears about an overdue credit card bill threatening her reputation, or she'd mention casually how embarrassed she'd be if she couldn't join Richard's colleagues' wives for their spa weekend. Each time, I'd transfer money with the understanding it was just until things settled. Those things never settled, and over 15 years, I funneled nearly $60,000 into maintaining my sister's facade. Why did I do it? Part of me still saw the little girl who'd climb into my bed during thunderstorms. Part of me felt responsible for her happiness. And honestly, part of me believed her promises that once she and Richard made it big, they'd repay everything with interest. What Richard didn't know, what no one knew except Heather and me, was that his family's wealth was mostly tied up in properties and not accessible for daily luxuries. His monthly income covered their mortgage and basics, but Heather's designer wardrobe, spa treatments, and lavish parties were largely funded by her schoolteacher sister's nursing salary. Each year, Heather's Christmas gathering became more extravagant and her attitude more condescending. Last year, she referred to my sensible sedan as quaint and suggested Emma might benefit from elocution lessons. I swallowed my pride, remembering our parents' unwavering belief in family loyalty. My children adored their Aunt Heather despite everything. They saw only the glamorous woman who gave expensive gifts and lived in a mansion. Emma had been talking about Heather's Christmas party for weeks, especially excited about seeing the 12-foot tree with its color-coordinated ornaments and the chocolate fountain Heather had mentioned. Tyler had proudly made a special ornament for his aunt's tree in art class, a clay star painted gold with red glitter. He'd wrapped it carefully, asking repeatedly if I thought Aunt Heather would like it. "She likes fancy things," he'd said, his small face serious. The invitation arrived in late November, thick cream cardstock with gold embossing announcing their annual holiday soiree. I'd marked the date and we'd begun our preparations, saving a little each week for appropriate gifts and outfits. Then came the phone call that changed everything. When I hung up after Heather's shocking request, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down. Her words echoed in my mind, low class, not on my level. I thought about all the nights I'd eaten ramen so I could send her money. The family vacation to the Grand Canyon we'd canceled when Heather needed help with her property taxes. The second job I'd taken cleaning medical offices on weekends. My first instinct was to call her back and tell her exactly where she could put her Christmas invitation. Instead, I texted my best friend, Rachel, who came over with a bottle of wine after her shift at the hospital where we both worked. "What?" Rachel exclaimed, pouring us each a generous glass. "After everything you've done for her, Allison, you need to cut her off completely." "It's not that simple," I sighed, glancing toward the kids' bedrooms where they were doing homework. "They love their aunt, and despite everything, she's still my sister." Rachel shook her head. "Your sister is taking advantage of you. Has been for years. You work 60-hour weeks while she posts Instagram photos from luxury resorts." "I know, I admit it. But family is family. Mom and Dad always taught us to stick together." "Your parents also taught you about dignity and self-respect," Rachel countered. Would they want you to be treated this way? That question stayed with me long after Rachel left. The next morning, I found Emma looking at the calendar where we'd marked Heather's Christmas party. How many more days until Aunt Heather's party? She asked excitedly. I want to see if her pool is frozen like last year. Tyler joined us, clutching his wrapped ornament. Do you think Uncle Richard will do the scavenger hunt again? I almost found the golden candy cane last time. Their innocent excitement made my decision even harder. How could I tell them we weren't welcome because their aunt thought we weren't good enough? That the presents they'd helped select weren't sophisticated enough for my sister's standards? That evening, I pulled out the memory box containing photos of Heather and me growing up. There we were, building sandcastles at Lake Michigan, riding bikes with streamers, opening Christmas presents in matching pajamas. When had money and status become more important to her than these shared memories? I remembered our father's words when Heather announced she was marrying Richard. Just remember who you are, sweetheart, where you come from. Money changes circumstances, not character. Dad had been gone 5 years now, Mom 3. What would they advise me to do? The answer came. Clearly. They would tell me to stand up for myself and my children, while still leaving the door open for reconciliation. That night, I made my decision. We would attend the Christmas gathering. All 3 of us. If Heather wanted to make a scene in front of her high society friends, that would be her choice. But I would no longer enable her delusion of grandeur at the expense of my children's dignity or my own self-respect. The next 2 weeks were spent preparing. I used my Christmas bonus to buy Emma a beautiful emerald green dress that made her eyes shine. For Tyler, I found a handsome little suit at a consignment shop that looked brand new. I splurged on having their outfits professionally pressed and scheduled appointments at the salon where my friend Jessie worked for proper haircuts. For myself, I chose a simple black cocktail dress I'd worn to a hospital fundraiser, adding a statement necklace Rachel insisted on lending me. If you're going into battle, you need proper armor, she'd said. I also prepared the children carefully, explaining that sometimes adults have disagreements, but that didn't mean they should worry. And Heather is very particular about her home, I explained during our family dinner. So we'll need to use our very best manners. And if she seems upset about something, that's not about you, okay? That's grown-up stuff. Is Aunt Heather mad at us? Tyler asked, his brow furrowed. No, sweetheart. Aunt Heather just has a different way of doing things. But we're family, and family shows up for each other, even when it's hard. Emma, perceptive beyond her years, studied my face. Are you and Aunt Heather fighting? I chose my words carefully. We have different ideas about some things, but that's okay. People can disagree and still love each other. As Christmas approached, my anxiety grew. I rehearsed potential scenarios in my mind, preparing responses to whatever Heather might say or do. I reminded myself of all the times I dealt with difficult families as a nurse, maintaining professionalism even when emotions ran high. I could do this. For my children. For myself. And yes, even for Heather, who somewhere beneath her designer clothes and status anxiety, was still my little sister. The night before the party, I checked our gifts one last time. The handmade scarf for Heather was wrapped in silver paper with a blue velvet bow. Richard's fishing book was accompanied by a selection of hand-tied flies I'd found at a specialty shop. He'd mentioned wanting to learn fly fishing last year. For their home, I'd selected a hand-blown glass ornament from a local artist, not expensive, but thoughtful and unique. That night, I barely slept, running through every possible outcome of our uninvited appearance. By morning, I'd made peace with whatever might happen. We were going to show up with heads held high, dignity intact, ready to celebrate Christmas as a family, whether Heather approved or not. On Christmas Eve, we drove through the imposing iron gates of Heather and Richard's estate. Fresh snow had fallen the night before, transforming the 5-acre property into something from a holiday card. Pristine white blanketed the rolling lawns and evergreen trees, each perfectly wrapped in white lights. A team of workers was clearing the circular driveway as we approached the 3-story Georgian mansion. Wow, breathed Emma, pressing her face against the car window. It's like a castle. Tyler clutched his wrapped ornament tighter. Do real princesses live in houses like this? Just your Aunt Heather, I replied, trying to keep my tone light as I parked behind a line of luxury vehicles, Mercedes, BMWs, and a Bentley I recognized as belonging to Richard's father. The facade of the house was decorated with professional precision, garlands framing every window, life-size nutcrackers flanking the massive front door, and a tasteful arrangement of poinsettias cascading down the stone steps. I'd seen similar displays in architectural magazines, but never up close. Emma and Tyler clambered out of the car, their excitement palpable as they carefully navigated the cleared pathway in their dress shoes. I followed more slowly, balancing our gifts and the homemade cranberry bread I'd baked that morning, a recipe from our mother that Heather had always loved. Before we could ring the bell, the door swung open to reveal Heather, stunning in a red designer dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my mortgage payments. Her perfect blonde hair was swept into an elegant updo, and diamonds sparkled at her ears and throat. For a split second, genuine shock registered on her face before she composed herself into a tight smile. Allison, she said, her voice artificially bright, and everyone. What a surprise. Her eyes darted behind us toward the driveway, clearly checking if other guests had witnessed our arrival. Finding the coast clear, she stepped back reluctantly to let us enter. "I thought we discussed this," she hissed quietly as the children moved past her into the soaring entryway with its 20-foot Christmas tree. "We did," I replied calmly. "And I decided my children deserved to spend Christmas with their family. All of their family." Before she could respond, Richard appeared behind her, his warm smile a stark contrast to his wife's frosty reception. "Allison, kids, wonderful to see you." He embraced me genuinely before kneeling to high-five Tyler and compliment Emma on her dress. "The more the merrier, right, darling?" he added, glancing at Heather. "Of course," she replied through clenched teeth. "Let me show you where to put your things." She eyed our wrapped packages with barely disguised disdain. As we followed her through the marble-floored foyer, I could see about 30 guests mingling in the great room beyond. The air was filled with classical Christmas music from hidden speakers, and uniformed servers circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. "Richard's parents are here, along with the Andersons and the Taylors," Heather informed me, name-dropping local socialites. "Oh, and the Wilsons just flew in from Aspen this morning. Jack Wilson is considering Richard for their new development project." I recognized this for what it was, a reminder that important people were present, and I needed to behave accordingly. Translation: "Don't embarrass her. The children can put their coats in the mudroom," she continued, pointing toward a side hallway. "There's a media room downstairs where they can watch movies. Brittany, our sitter, is down there with the Andersons' kids." Actually, I interjected gently, Emma and Tyler were looking forward to the party. "Tyler even made you a special ornament for your tree." On cue, Tyler proudly held up his tissue-wrapped creation. "I made it myself." A flicker of something, annoyance? Panic? Crossed Heather's perfect features before she took the package with fingertips, as if accepting a questionable laboratory sample. "How thoughtful. I'll just put this somewhere safe for now. Our tree decorator used a very specific color scheme this year." Tyler's face fell slightly, but he nodded bravely. Richard, observing this exchange, quickly intervened. "Hey, Tyler, why don't you show me this masterpiece? I bet it would look perfect on the family tree in the den. That's where we put all our special ornaments." As Richard led Tyler away, I could have hugged him for his kindness. Heather, meanwhile, guided Emma and me toward the great room, whispering instructions as we walked. "Try not to mention your job, though. Wilsons are germaphobes and hospital talk makes them uncomfortable. And if anyone asks where you live, just say north of the city rather than naming your actual neighborhood." Before I could respond to these offensive suggestions, we entered the gathering of Heather's carefully curated guests. Conversations momentarily paused as curious eyes assessed the newcomers. I felt Emma press closer to my side, suddenly shy among these unfamiliar, impeccably dressed adults. "Everyone, this is my sister Allison and my niece Emma," Heather announced with forced cheerfulness. "They decided to surprise us tonight." A murmur of polite greetings followed, though I caught a few exchanged glances that suggested Heather had perhaps mentioned me before, and not favorably. Within minutes, Emma was drawn away by another young girl around her age, leaving me momentarily alone. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and took a small sip, using the moment to observe the room. The decor was stunning, crystal, silver, and white, with accents of deep burgundy. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, and a massive stone fireplace crackled with a perfectly arranged fire. I was admiring an ice sculpture of a reindeer when I overheard Heather speaking to two women near the bar. "Yes, that's my sister," she was saying quietly. "Single mom, works at the hospital. I try to include her when I can, you know. Charity begins at home, and all that." The women nodded sympathetically, one patting Heather's arm in apparent admiration of her generosity. I felt my cheeks burn but maintained my composure, remembering my purpose for being here. This wasn't about me. It was about my children experiencing a family Christmas and learning that they were worthy of respect, regardless of their zip code or the cost of their clothes. After about 30 minutes of small talk with various guests, most of whom seemed surprised to learn Heather had a sister, I excused myself to check on the children. I found Emma helping younger kids with a craft project, her natural nurturing abilities evident in her patient instructions. Tyler was proudly showing Richard's father his ornament, now hanging prominently on a smaller tree in the wood-paneled den. As I watched them, Heather appeared at my side. "We need to talk," she said tersely, guiding me into a nearby powder room and closing the door. "What were you thinking, showing up after what I told you?" she demanded, arms crossed over her designer dress. "I was thinking that family doesn't exclude family from Christmas," I replied evenly. "And that my children deserve better than to be deemed low-class by their own aunt." "You know what I meant," she huffed. "This is an important night for Richard's business connections. I need everything to be perfect." "And we're imperfect how exactly?" I asked. "Because we don't wear designer labels? Because Tyler's ornament doesn't match your color scheme. Don't be dramatic." Heather rolled her eyes. "You know how these things work. Appearances matter." "To who, Heather? To these people you're trying so hard to impress? Do they know that half your appearances are funded by your nurse sister's salary?" Her eyes widened in alarm. "Keep your voice down. And that's not fair. I've had some temporary cash flow issues, that's all. 15 years of temporary issues, I pointed out. But we're not discussing that now. We're here as family. The children are behaving beautifully and will continue to do so. I suggest you do the same. Without waiting for her response, I opened the door and returned to the party, my heart pounding, but my resolve stronger than ever. Whatever game Heather was playing, I was no longer a willing participant. At 7, a server gently struck a crystal chime, signaling dinner was ready. Guests began migrating toward the formal dining room, where a table that could comfortably seat 30 was arranged with precision that would impress a military general. Fine china, sterling silver, and crystal glassware gleamed under the light of an antique chandelier. Each place setting included 3 wine glasses, multiple forks, and a hand-calligraphed name card. I noticed with a pang that there were no place cards for Emma, Tyler, or me. Heather approached, feigning dismay at the oversight. Oh dear, it seems our calligrapher didn't prepare cards for you since you weren't on the original guest list. Let me just rearrange things, she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Richard intervened smoothly. No problem at all. Kids, would you like to sit by me? And Allison, there's plenty of room between Mrs. Wilson and my mother. As we settled into our assigned seats, mine between 2 older women who regarded me with polite curiosity, I noticed Heather whispering to the server, who nodded and disappeared briefly before returning with 3 place settings that clearly didn't match the rest of the table. The message wasn't subtle. We were afterthoughts, accommodated but not truly welcome. The first course arrived, a delicate butternut squash soup garnished with truffle oil and microgreens. Tyler eyed it suspiciously before taking a tentative spoon. Emma, always more adventurous with food, dug in with enthusiasm. So Allison, began Mrs. Wilson, Richard's potential business partner's wife. Heather tells us you work at a hospital. Yes, I am a pediatric nurse at County General, I replied. How noble, she said with what seemed like genuine admiration. My sister volunteered at a children's hospital last year. She found it quite intense. It can be challenging, I agreed, but also incredibly rewarding. There's nothing quite like helping a child through illness and seeing them recover. And you're raising 2 children on your own? Asked Richard's mother from my other side. Her tone was kind rather than judgmental. Yes, Emma and Tyler. They're wonderful kids. They certainly seem to be, she nodded approvingly, glancing toward where they sat with Richard. Well-mannered and bright. You should be proud. This simple acknowledgement nearly brought tears to my eyes after Heather's dismissive attitude. Thank you. I am. Across the table, Heather was holding court, describing their recent weekend at a luxury ski resort in Vail. The private lessons were worth every penny, she declared. The instructor used to train Olympic athletes. Speaking of expense, interjected a man I recognized as Richard's college friend. How's that investment opportunity you mentioned last month? Did you decide to buy in? Richard looked momentarily uncomfortable. We're still considering our options. The timing might not be right with the new pool house renovations. Oh, we're definitely moving forward with a pool house, Heather corrected him. I've already approved the final designs, imported marble, smart home integration throughout. It's going to be featured in Modern Luxury magazine. Richard's surprise was evident but quickly masked. I wondered how many of Heather's unilateral decisions were funded by my loans. The second course arrived, a frisee salad with poached pears and candied walnuts. Tyler frowned. At the unfamiliar greens, but catching my encouraging nod, bravely took a bite. And what neighborhood do you live in, Allison? Asked a woman further down the table, her diamond earrings catching the light as she tilted her head. Before I could answer, Heather interjected, Allison lives in a charming area north of the city. Very up and coming. Elmwood Park, I stated clearly. It's a wonderful community with excellent schools and parks. The woman's expression revealed she wasn't familiar with the middle-class suburb, but she nodded politely. And what school do your children attend? She continued. My grandson just started at Lakeside Academy. Again, Heather attempted to intercept. They're in the public school system. Allison is very involved in their education. Emma and Tyler attend Elmwood Elementary, I said directly. Emma's in the gifted program for mathematics and Tyler is thriving in their arts curriculum. As I spoke, Tyler accidentally knocked over his water glass. The crystal tumbled, splashing water across the pristine tablecloth. His face crumpled in mortification. I'm sorry, he gasped, frantically trying to mop up the spill with his napkin. Before I could reassure him, Heather's voice cut through the momentary hush. This is exactly why children should eat separately until they're properly trained for formal dining. The cruel comment hung in the air. Tyler's lower lip trembled, and I saw Emma's shoulders stiffen in defense of her brother. Richard quickly handed Tyler his own napkin. No harm done, buddy. I did much worse at my parents' dinner party when I was your age, knocked over an entire gravy boat onto my father's boss. His father chuckled in confirmation. Ruined a perfectly good suit, but suits can be replaced. Good company can't. The warm response from Richard and his father seemed to further irritate Heather, whose smile had grown increasingly rigid. As the evening progressed, she directed the conversation toward her recent charity work, organizing a fundraiser for the Art Museum's new wing. We raised over $300,000, she boasted. The chairwoman said it was the most successful event in their history. That's wonderful, commented Richard's mother. Which programs will benefit specifically? Heather hesitated, clearly unfamiliar with the actual purpose of the fundraiser beyond its social prestige. Oh, various educational initiatives, of course. Actually, offered another guest, I believe it's primarily funding the new contemporary exhibition space. My wife is on the museum board. Heather's smile tightened further. Yes, exactly. That's what I meant. The main course arrived, herb-crusted rack of lamb with truffle mashed potatoes and haricots verts. As the servers presented each plate with choreographed precision, I caught Emma staring at the array of utensils with uncertainty. Start from the outside and work your way in, I whispered, having researched formal dining etiquette before our arrival. Heather noticed this exchange and seized the opportunity. Emma, darling, that's your salad fork. You're using. The dinner fork is the larger one. Emma blushed, quickly switching utensils. It's hard to keep track when there are so many, Heather continued, addressing the table at large. Proper table manners are really something that should be taught from an early age, but I suppose in public schools they have other priorities. Several guests shifted uncomfortably at this transparent dig. Richard's mother raised an eyebrow but remained silent. Richard himself was engaged in conversation with Tyler about dinosaurs, deliberately ignoring his wife's comment. Actually, I responded evenly, Emma and Tyler have lovely manners. They're just not accustomed to 8-piece play settings. But they're quick learners. Of course they are, Richard's mother agreed, giving Emma an encouraging smile. And you're doing just fine, dear. I still mix up my forks sometimes, and I've been attending formal dinners for 40 years. Heather, thwarted in her attempt to embarrass my children, turned her attention to the gift I'd brought. The hand-blown glass ornament now displayed on a side table with other hostess gifts. Allison brought the most interesting ornament, she announced. It's quite folksy, isn't it? Handmade by a local artist, she said. May I see it? Asked Richard's mother, who genuinely seemed interested. The ornament was passed to her, and she examined it with appreciation. This is beautiful workmanship. Is this from that new glass studio downtown? I've been meaning to visit. Yes, Firelight Studios, I confirmed. The artist trained in Venice before opening his shop here. I must get his information before I leave, she said, handing the ornament back with care. This would make a lovely gift for my sister. Heather's attempt to diminish my gift had backfired, adding to her visibly growing frustration. As the dinner progressed through its final courses, a cheese selection, then a delicate chocolate mousse, her comments became increasingly pointed. When Tyler mentioned his school's upcoming science fair, she remarked how fortunate the private school children were to have actual laboratories with proper equipment. When Emma shyly shared that she'd made honor roll, Heather noted that the standards must be different in public education, since every child at Lakeside Academy is required to maintain at least a 3.8 GPA. Each comment was delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, each designed to establish the superiority of her world over ours. For hours, I maintained my composure, reminding myself that my children were watching and learning from how I handled this situation. But as I observed Emma's gradually wilting posture and Tyler's increasingly forced smile, something shifted inside me. The years of accepting Heather's condescension, of financing her illusions, of prioritizing family peace over personal dignity, it all crystallized into a sudden, clear resolve. When Heather mockingly praised Tyler's department store suit as adorable and suggested I consider the children's consignment shop where struggling families find nice secondhand clothes, I saw tears form in my son's eyes. And I knew the time for polite tolerance had ended. After dinner, guests migrated to the great room for coffee, desserts, and what Heather announced would be a traditional gift exchange among intimate friends. This apparently didn't include us, as no one had informed me of this tradition, leaving me without appropriate gifts for the assembled company. Heather made sure everyone was aware of this oversight. Don't worry about not bringing anything for the exchange, Allison, she said loudly as servers distributed small, elegantly wrapped packages to each guest. You couldn't have known since you weren't originally, well, you know. Several guests looked uncomfortable at this pointed exclusion. Richard quickly intervened. Actually, let's consider Allison and the kids' presents our special gift this year. Family is what Christmas is all about, isn't it? His genuine warmth only highlighted Heather's coldness by contrast. As guests began opening their presents, each revealing expensive items like cashmere scarves, artisanal spirits, and luxury candles, Heather approached with our gift, still in its silver wrapping. Let me open this. Now, she announced to the room. My sister brought something, homemade, I believe. The way she emphasized homemade made it sound like I'd wrapped up a macaroni necklace. I watched as she deliberately tore the paper carelessly, revealing the handcrafted scarf I'd selected from a local artisan shop. Oh, she said with exaggerated surprise. It's colorful. Thank you, Allison. I'm sure it will be perfect for gardening or something. The scarf, a stunning creation of hand-dyed silk in subtle jewel tones, was clearly not gardening attire. Several women nearby actually murmured appreciatively at the piece, one even asking where it was from. Some little shop in Allison's neighborhood, I imagine, Heather answered before I could speak. They have the most quaint little businesses there, so budget-friendly. She set the scarf aside without further acknowledgement and moved on to opening gifts from other guests, exclaiming with delight over each one. Tyler, who had been watching quietly from beside me, tugged at my sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "and Heather doesn't like our presents, does she?" "Some people have trouble appreciating thoughtful gifts, sweetheart," I replied quietly. "That's about them, not about the gift." Emma, overhearing this exchange, slipped her hand into mine and squeezed it supportively. My heart swelled with pride at my children's emotional intelligence in the face of such poor behavior. Heather, meanwhile, had moved on to telling stories, specifically childhood anecdotes deliberately chosen to paint me in an unflattering light. "Did you know Allison once showed up to my sweet 16 in a homemade dress?" she told the gathered guests, laughing. "Mom tried to teach her to sew, and Allison insisted on making this horrific purple creation. The seams were coming apart by the end of the night. What she omitted was that our family couldn't afford to buy me a new dress that month because Dad's medical bills from his back surgery had strained our budget. I'd stayed up 3 nights in a row working on that dress, determined not to ask for money we didn't have. And in college," she continued, "she dated this absolutely hopeless boy who worked at the campus bookstore. He would pick her up on a bicycle with a milk crate attached to the back as a passenger seat. Can you imagine that? That hopeless boy had been working his way through college, saving for medical school. The bicycle was his only transportation, and he'd added the crate specifically so he could take me on dates despite not owning a car." With each story, Heather systematically undermined my dignity in front of her social circle, all while maintaining the veneer of sisterly teasing. I saw Richard becoming increasingly uncomfortable, occasionally trying to change the subject, but Heather was determined to continue her performance. The final straw came when she began criticizing my parenting directly. "It's really admirable how Allison manages with the children, considering their circumstances," she said to the room at large. "Public school, no father figure, living in that neighborhood. It's not what I would choose, of course, but Allison has always been content with less." Emma and Tyler were both within earshot, and I saw their expressions fall. Tyler's bottom lip quivered slightly, while Emma's face flushed with humiliation. In that moment, something inside me snapped. 15 years of supporting Heather's facade, of enabling her delusions of grandeur, of prioritizing her feelings over my children's well-being, it all crystallized into absolute clarity. I stood up, smoothing my dress with deliberate calmness. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady. "I'd like to propose a toast." The room quieted as guests turned toward me, some looking curious, others uncomfortable. Heather's face registered alarm as a server handed me a champagne flute. "First, I want to thank Heather and Richard for including us in their beautiful Christmas celebration," I began. "Family gatherings are precious, especially during the holidays." Heather's expression relaxed slightly, perhaps thinking I was going to smooth things over. "I'd like to toast to my sister," I continued. "To Heather, who has created this impressive life for herself and has always had such discerning taste." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Heather smiled triumphantly. "Such discerning taste, in fact, that maintaining it has cost approximately $4,000 a month for the past 15 years. The room fell utterly silent. Heather's smile froze on her face. "You see," I explained conversationally, while Heather has been sharing stories about my supposedly humble life, she's neglected to mention that her designer wardrobe, spa memberships, luxury vacations, and many of the furnishings in this beautiful home have been subsidized by her low-class sister, the nurse who apparently isn't quite good enough to attend her Christmas party." Gasps and uncomfortable shifting filled the room. Richard's face showed complete confusion, then dawning comprehension. "For those who are mathematically inclined," I continued calmly, "that's approximately $720,000 over 15 years. Money that could have gone toward my children's college funds, or perhaps purchasing a home in a neighborhood Heather might find more acceptable." I reached for my phone and pulled up my banking app. I have records of every transfer, every bill paid, every credit card statement covered when Heather called in panic because her card was declined at Neiman Marcus or the spa. "Allison, stop it," Heather hissed, her face now drained of color. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Heather," I said, "for the first time in 15 years, I'm not embarrassing myself. I'm simply telling the truth." I turned to address Richard directly. "I'm sorry you're finding this out this way. I believed Heather when she said you knew about our financial arrangement. I see now that wasn't true." Richard's expression was a mixture of shock and betrayal as he stared at his wife. "Heather, what is she talking about?" Heather's composure finally cracked. "She's exaggerating. It was just a few loans when we were getting established. Nothing like what she's claiming." "Let's see," I replied, scrolling through my phone. "Last month alone, $3,000 for the landscaping deposit, $800 for your spa weekend, $1,200 for the designer boots you couldn't live without." Should I continue? The silence in the room was deafening. Even the servers had paused, frozen in place by the unfolding drama. So I concluded, raising my glass, "I'd like to toast my kept sister, who thinks she's rich, and to announce that I'll be stopping payment on your luxuries, effective immediately. Merry Christmas, Heather." I took a sip of champagne, set down my glass, and turned to my children. Emma, Tyler, it's time for us to go. Please thank Uncle Richard for his hospitality. Tyler looked confused, but obediently thanked Richard, who seemed too stunned to respond. Emma, with wisdom beyond her years, simply nodded and gathered her things, understanding intuitively that something significant had just happened. As we walked through the silent room, past Heather's shell-shocked friends, and retrieved our coats from the mudroom, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if an invisible burden had finally been lifted from my shoulders. We had barely reached our car when I heard footsteps crunching rapidly across the snow behind us. Turning, I saw Richard approaching, his face a complex mixture of anger, confusion, and disbelief. "Allison, wait," he called. "We need to talk about this." Behind him, Heather was hurrying down the mansion steps, her designer heels inappropriate for the snow, causing her to slip and stumble in her pursuit. "Kids, get in the car, please," I said calmly, opening the back doors. "Turn on your tablets. I need a few minutes with your aunt and uncle." Emma and Tyler complied without argument, sensing the gravity of the situation. Once they were settled, I turned to face my sister and brother-in-law. "How dare you?" Heather hissed, her voice low but venomous. "You've humiliated me in front of everyone who matters." "How dare I?" I repeated incredulously. "You called my children low class. You mocked their clothes, their education, their home. You deliberately tried to make them feel inferior. And you're concerned about your humiliation. You've been helping Heather financially?" Richard interrupted, his question directed at me, but his eyes fixed on his wife. "For 15 years? Without my knowledge?" "Yes," I confirmed simply, "since shortly after your wedding. It started with small amounts, a credit card bill here, a shopping splurge there. Heather always said it was temporary, that you were building your business and couldn't access family funds yet. Over time, the amounts increased, and the temporary situation became permanent." Richard ran a hand through his hair, visibly processing this revelation. "The spa memberships? The designer wardrobes? The first-class upgrades whenever we travel?" "Most of it," I nodded. "Not everything, of course, but a significant portion." "She's exaggerating." Heather interjected desperately. "It was just occasional help when things were tight. Sisterly support. She's making it sound like charity." "Let me see your phone," Richard said suddenly, holding out his hand to me. I hesitated briefly, then unlocked my banking app and handed it to him. He scrolled in silence for several moments, his expression growing darker with each swipe. "Monthly transfers of $3,000 to $5,000, he read aloud. "For years. Direct payments to Nordstrom, Saks, the country club." "Heather, what the hell is this?" "Richard, please." Heather's voice took on a pleading quality I'd rarely heard. "It's not what it looks like." Allison offered to help. She wanted to contribute. "Contribute?" I echoed. "Heather, I've been working 60-hour weeks, eating ramen for dinner, and putting off home repairs to fund your lifestyle. I've delayed saving for my children's education to pay for your spa days. You never said no," she countered. "I asked, and you always said yes. That was your choice. Because you're my sister." I replied, my voice finally breaking. "Because every time you made it sound like an emergency. Because you promised it was the last time. Because I believed you when you said you'd pay it back someday." Richard handed my phone back, his expression unreadable. "The landscaping for the pool house," he said quietly. "You told me your parents had left you a special investment account that matured." Heather faltered. I needed to tell you something. You wouldn't have approved the renovation otherwise. And the trip to Bali last year? You said that was a bonus from your interior design client." "Richard, please," Heather whispered. "Not out here," he replied, his voice hardening. "No, I think out here is exactly where this conversation belongs. We've apparently been living a lie inside those walls for years." As they faced off, I became acutely aware of my children waiting in the car, of the cold seeping through my dress coat, of the curious faces watching from the windows of the mansion. This confrontation needed to happen, but not like this. "This is between you two now," I said firmly. "My part in it is over. I won't be sending any more money, Heather, not a dollar. You'll need to be honest with Richard about your finances and make whatever adjustments are necessary. You can't just cut me off." Heather protested, panic edging into her voice. "What about the credit card bill due next week? The spa package I've already booked for New Year's?" The entitlement in her tone confirmed that I was making the right decision. "Those are your problems now, not mine. I have my own family to take care of." "We are your family," she insisted. "Yes, you are," I agreed. "And family treats each other with respect, not contempt. When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence, I'll be here. Until then, I need to focus on Emma and Tyler." Richard, who had been silent for several moments, suddenly spoke. "Allison, I want you to know I had no idea about any of this. I would never have allowed it if I'd known." "I believe you," I said simply. "And I'm sorry you're finding out this way." He nodded, then turned to Heather. "We need to go back inside. Your guests are waiting. But when they leave, you and I are going to have the most honest conversation of our marriage." Heather's face crumpled, the carefully constructed facade finally collapsing. For a moment, I glimpsed the vulnerable little sister I'd always tried to protect. The girl who'd been so insecure about our modest upbringing that she'd crafted an entirely different identity to escape it. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to say everything would be okay, as I had countless times. But another part, the part that had finally found its voice tonight, knew this was a necessary reckoning for both our sakes. "Goodbye, Heather," I said quietly. "Merry Christmas." As I turned to get into my car, I heard her call my name once more. When I looked back, she stood alone on the snowy driveway, her perfect makeup streaked with tears, looking smaller somehow without Richard beside her. "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked, and for the first time in years, there was no manipulation in her question, just genuine fear. "You figure it out," I answered honestly. "Like the rest of us do. One day at a time." With that, I got into my car and drove away from the mansion, with its twinkling lights and watching eyes, heading back toward our modest home where the Christmas tree might be smaller, but the love was real. In the rearview mirror, I could see my children's reflections, their expressions solemn as they processed what they'd witnessed. Tomorrow, we would talk about it properly. I would explain that sometimes loving someone means setting boundaries, that worth isn't measured by possessions but by character, that the truth, however difficult, is always better than a beautiful lie. But for tonight, as we drove through the quiet, snow-covered streets, I simply reached back and squeezed their hands, grateful for the authentic life we shared, free at last from the burden of maintaining someone else's illusion. The drive home from Heather's mansion felt surreal, as if we were traveling between different worlds rather than just different neighborhoods. Christmas lights twinkled along the route, and occasional snowflakes drifted lazily through our headlight beams. In the back seat, Emma and Tyler had fallen silent, processing the evening's dramatic events in their own ways. "Are you mad at Aunt Heather?" Tyler finally asked in a small voice. I considered my answer carefully. Not mad, exactly. Disappointed. Sometimes people we love make choices that hurt us, and it's okay to feel sad about that. "Is she still our aunt?" Emma's practical question cut to the heart of what both children were likely wondering. "Of course she is," I assured them. "Family is forever, even when relationships get complicated. But sometimes family members need time apart to figure things out." When we arrived home, our modest Christmas tree greeted us through the front window, its multicolored lights a stark contrast to Heather's professionally decorated monochrome display. Inside, I kicked off my heels with relief and suggested an impromptu Christmas Eve celebration of our own. "Let's make hot chocolate and watch a holiday movie," I proposed. "The fancy party wasn't much fun anyway. Can we open one present tonight?" Tyler asked hopefully, his resilience already reasserting itself. "I think that's a perfect idea," I agreed. Within 30 minutes, we had transformed our evening. Still wearing our party clothes, but now wrapped in cozy blankets, we sipped homemade hot chocolate topped with mini marshmallows, while How the Grinch Stole Christmas played on our television. The children each opened one carefully selected gift, new pajamas that they immediately changed into, and the tension from Heather's mansion gradually melted away in the warmth of our small living room. After the children went to bed, I sat alone by the Christmas tree, finally allowing myself to process the enormity of what had happened. For 15 years, I had enabled Heather's fantasy life at the expense of my own family's security. Tonight, I had finally broken that cycle. The relief was palpable, but so was the grief for the relationship I had hoped to have with my sister. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "How did it go?" I typed out a brief summary, ending with, "I'll call you tomorrow with details. Kids are asleep." "I'm okay." She responded immediately, "Proud of you. Merry Christmas to you. No more subsidizing ungrateful siblings." Christmas morning arrived with fresh snow and excited children who temporarily forgot the previous night's drama in the joy of opening presents. We FaceTimed with Jack, their father, who wished them Merry Christmas from his new home in California. Though our relationship had ended years ago, we maintained a cordial connection for the children's sake. Around noon, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was Richard. "Allison, I hope I'm not interrupting your Christmas," he began, his voice sounding tired. "I wanted to check that you and the kids got home safely last night." "We did, thank you," I replied, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. "How are things there?" He sighed heavily. "Difficult." After the guests left, Heather and I talked. Really talked, for the first time in years. I had no idea about the financial arrangement between you two. I'm still processing it all. I understand. It's a lot to take in. "I want you to know I've frozen the credit cards and asked for a complete audit of our finances," he continued. "The extent of the deception, it's larger than even you knew. There are loans in my name I never authorized, accounts I didn't know existed." My stomach tightened with dread. "Richard, I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize. You're not responsible for Heather's choices." His voice softened. "But I am sorry for how she treated you and the children. It was inexcusable." "Thank you for saying that," I replied, genuinely touched by his acknowledgement. "We're getting help," he said. "Financial counseling, marriage counseling. It's going to be a long road." He paused. Heather, struggling behind all that arrogance, is someone who never felt good enough. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but maybe it explains some of it. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, turning his words over in my mind. Had I somehow contributed to Heather's insecurities by always being the responsible one, by bailing her out repeatedly instead of letting her face consequences? These were questions without easy answers. In the days that followed, I experienced a strange mixture of emotions, liberation paired with moments of guilt, relief shadowed by sadness. The practical reality of my decision quickly became apparent. Without the monthly drain of supporting Heather, my bank account began to recover. I started a proper college fund for the children and scheduled long overdue repairs for our aging HVAC system. I also began therapy, recognizing that untangling 15 years of financial codependence required professional guidance. My therapist helped me understand the complex dynamics at play, how my desire to protect Heather had morphed into enabling, how my own self-worth had become tied to being the reliable rescuer. 2 weeks after Christmas, an envelope arrived from Heather's address. Inside was a check for $5,000, a pittance compared to what she'd received over the years, but significant nonetheless, and a brief note. A start. I'm sorry. I deposited the check but didn't respond immediately. Actions would speak louder than words, and one payment didn't erase years of exploitation and disrespect. In late January, Richard called again, asking if I would meet with them both. Heather's been doing work on herself. She wants to apologize properly, but understands if you're not ready. I agreed to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. When I arrived, Heather looked markedly different from the polished socialite who had hosted Christmas Eve. Her designer clothes had been replaced with simple jeans and a sweater, her elaborate hairstyle with a natural ponytail. More striking was the absence of her usual confidence, replaced by a palpable nervousness. Thank you for coming, she began awkwardly after we ordered coffee. I've been trying to figure out what to say, how to explain, but there's no explanation that makes what I did okay. No, there isn't, I agreed, neither attacking nor rescuing her. The financial stuff, taking your money all these years, was wrong, she continued. But even worse was how I treated you and the kids. Looking down on you, acting superior when all along you were the one keeping me afloat. Her voice cracked. I was so ashamed of who I really was that I created this whole fake persona, and eventually I started believing it myself. Why? I asked simply. We came from the same family, Heather. Mom and Dad gave us the same values, the same love. When did money and status become everything to you? She stared into her coffee. I don't know exactly. Maybe in middle school when the popular girls made fun of my thrift store clothes. Or in high school when I wasn't invited to parties at the lake houses because I wasn't their kind. I decided I would become their kind, whatever it took. For the first time, I glimpsed how differently we had experienced our childhood, how moments I had brushed off had cut deeply into Heather's sense of self-worth. We are selling the mansion, Richard interjected. Moving to something within our actual means. Heather's looking for work too, he added. I'm starting at a design firm next month, she said. Entry-level position, but it's something I actually know how to do. And we're both in financial counseling, learning to live on a budget for the first time. As our conversation continued, I maintained clear boundaries while leaving space for potential reconciliation. This wasn't an instant fix. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But it was a start. Over the following months, our relationship began a slow transformation. Heather sent regular payments toward what she now acknowledged as a debt, not gifts. More importantly, she showed genuine interest in my life and the children's activities, attending Tyler's school play and Emma's math competition without a single disparaging comment about public education. 6 months after the Christmas confrontation, we celebrated Emma's 11th birthday with a simple backyard barbecue. Heather and Richard arrived with thoughtful, age-appropriate gifts and without the designer labels and status symbols that had once defined their presence. When Emma showed Heather her science project, a working model of the solar system, my sister listened with authentic enthusiasm rather than condescension. You know, Rachel commented as we watched them interact, I never thought I'd say this, but your sister actually seems like a real person now. She's trying, I acknowledged. We all are. The most profound changes, however, weren't in Heather, but in myself and my children. Without the financial burden of supporting my sister, I was able to reduce my overtime hours, spending more quality time with Emma and Tyler. We took our first real vacation that summer, a week at a lakeside cabin where we swam, hiked, and reconnected without the constant pressure of financial stress. Emma and Tyler, having witnessed their mother finally stand up for herself and them, carried this lesson into their own lives. Emma became more assertive at school, confidently correcting a teacher who tried to take credit for her original research. Tyler stood up to a playground bully, not with aggression, but with calm dignity that diffused the situation entirely. You taught us it's okay to say no to people who don't treat you right, even if they're family, Emma told me one evening as I tucked her in. That's important, isn't it? I agreed. It's one of the most important lessons there is. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. A year after that fateful Christmas, we gathered again for the holidays, not in a mansion with hired servers and social climbers, but in Richard and Heather's new, modest home. The decorations were simple, the food was homemade, and the atmosphere was genuinely warm. Heather, now working full-time and contributing equally to her household, had found an authentic confidence that her previous facade had only imitated. As we sat around their table, I realized that the painful revelation at last year's Christmas party had ultimately been a gift to all of us. It had freed me from the burden of enabling Heather, from the prison of pretense, and the children from the subtle message that wealth determined worth. "I'd like to propose a toast," Richard announced, raising his glass. "To family, not perfect, but real. And to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," we echoed, glasses clinking in the candlelight. That night, driving home with sleepy children in the back seat, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed in a single year. By standing up for myself and my children, by refusing to continue a destructive pattern, I had not only improved our financial situation, but had also modeled the self-respect I wanted my children to develop. True worth, I had learned, isn't measured in designer labels or social approval. It's found in authenticity, in healthy boundaries, in the courage to live according to your values, even when doing so disrupts comfortable patterns. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to stop enabling destructive behavior and insist on truth, however uncomfortable it might be. As we pulled into our driveway, Emma stirred in the back seat. "Mom, are you glad about what happened last Christmas, even though it was hard?" I considered her question carefully. "Yes, sweetheart, I am. Sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most important changes." "I think Aunt Heather is happier now," Tyler observed sleepily. "She laughs for real, not the fake laugh she used to do." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, smiling at their perceptiveness. "I think you're right. Sometimes people get lost trying to be something they're not. Finding your way back to who you really are is the greatest gift of all."